Good afternoon, everyone. The mic works. It's very nice and loud. I like that. My name is Roger Nias. I'm the U.S. Ambassador to Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. And I would be happy to share my travel records with any of you to compare the number of individual flights I've taken in the first 4 months of my tenure, because it's been a lot. And so that and other experience qualifies me to moderate this great panel. I'm especially grateful to the fantastic panelists, some of whom have flown into to Barbados just to be part of this. So I would like to just welcome Jenny Ann Urban, Managing Director of the Air Charter Maintenance National Air Transportation Association, NATA.
Yes, sir.
NATA. I would like to welcome Isaac Solomon, Acting President of the Caribbean Development Bank, Hannah Swift, the Country Manager of the Caribbean for Virgin Atlantic, our friend who I've had lots of opportunities to chat with, Lyndon Gardner, founder and chair of Inter-Caribbean Airways and Inter-Island Aviation Services Group, and then Donna Regis Prosper, Secretary General and Chief Executive Officer of the Caribbean Tourism Organization. So we have really all aspects of our aviation sector that we're going to be talking about today. And I'd really like to just kick it off because we're going to try to get through a lot of topics and hopefully cover any of the issues that you're interested in. First, I'm just going to go down the line as just to create a scene setter of, please share your perspective on the aviation sector, specifically in the Eastern Caribbean, as much as you can provide that level of detail. But just what is your view on the outlook for our region and prospects for enhancing connectivity? Because I'll provide some context after you've shared your initial comments.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, Ambassador. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm quite happy to be in a Caribbean context, the opening batswoman. So that being said, when I think of recovery, it's difficult, even though I represent this all-important sector of tourism, it's very difficult for me to segment and look at it in terms of the entire region. So, we on post-pandemic, we on a recovery path. And this recovery is definitely fueled by a post-pandemic era, and also a focus on sustainability and also a focus on rebuilding infrastructure systems and on all of that. So COVID did give us that opportunity for rebuilding. And I'm very pleased to indicate by the end of June this year, our predictions is that the Caribbean in a whole will recover by over 13% over 2019. So that is significant growth for the Caribbean in terms of international arrivals. Intra-regional arrival movement is a different story, unfortunately. And one of the things that we definitely have to fall back on in the Caribbean is our strong brand as it relates to travel and tourism. This is one of the strongest brands in the entire world. And we need to continue to cultivate that beyond the 3 S's and looking at our people, our culture, our cuisine, our art, our sports. Someone recently said that, definitely when the world or the earth was being created, God spent some extra time in the Caribbean. I really subscribe to that. But we cannot be complacent and say because we're beautiful, people are going to go and come to us. So we definitely have to look at connectivity. Definitely air connectivity is very important, but additional types of connectivity are also important to bring into the mix. And that would include maritime connectivity as well as digital connectivity. So we have to bring those in. Our focus today is on air connectivity, and I do think that the Caribbean is moving in the right direction as it relates to both travel into the region and travel within the region. But there are many things that we need to tackle, and we cannot do it alone, or we cannot do it without an all-sector approach. And we have to be bold as we move forward in tackling the elephants in the room. That could include taxation, that includes passenger services and demand creation, price points, and all of that. So as we move forward, the big word for me is the partnership piece of everything that we do in the region, especially as it relates to public-private sector partnerships. And I will leave it here for now so that my other panelists could also weigh in.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I would just like to say from my company's perspective, we're very positive on the recovery so far. We're certainly seeing very near or surpassing some of the numbers that we've seen prior to the pandemic. And so we think that it's been a great recovery. What we see that will continue to assist us as we move forward and actually grow the sector. Obviously, the Caribbean has the 3 S's that she mentioned. That's never going to go away anytime soon. But we also have, for the most part, we're very secure jurisdictions. And I like to think of the Caribbean as one destination as opposed to thinking about all these varied island states. The security that we have here is, I think, is paramount to our future growth, and we must continue to do all we can to ensure that people, not only visitors, but ourselves feel safe in our own jurisdictions. Another point that will help us in our development is the ease of travel from the various source markets in the Caribbean, mostly North America and Europe. And I think each of us has a very good connectivity from outside the region into the Caribbean. We're certainly, as Inter-Caribbean, doing our part in ensuring that once people get here, they have the ability to move around. And then finally, the tourism infrastructure that exists. We're seeing throughout the Caribbean lots of new projects. We're seeing a lot of new investment in old stocks, and people are modernizing, and I think that will augur well for the future development and future growth of the sector.
Good afternoon, everyone. So for Virgin Atlantic, we have seen that the Caribbean has been one of our top destinations. We fly approximately 10% of our capacity as an airline into the Caribbean, which services 8 destinations directly. But I always say as country manager, I look after about 28 different countries. So that inter-regional connectivity is super important to us as an airline. We're definitely seeing record-breaking numbers coming into the Caribbean. We're seeing people wanting to spend more money. They want to travel in premium luxury, so they're traveling in our premium and upper class cabins. They're wanting to spend more money in the hotels. They're going for longer periods of time, and we're not seeing any downturn in the demand for the Caribbean at all.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as the only non-direct participant in this space, sorry, I think it's important for me to contextualize why I'm up here representing the Caribbean Development Bank. So I think, first of all, I need to indicate that CDB is the only indigenous multilateral development bank serving the Caribbean exclusively. Our mandate, simply put, is to transform lives across our borrowing member countries. And we see development, that transformation of lives, as an all-inclusive, all-embracing concept. And I think that is why air transport, as far as we're concerned, is a critical lever in that development. But we do not take air transport in isolation, as Donna said. It is part of 2 ecosystems, as I put it. One, the connectivity. And connectivity for us is very important as a region. If we are to have a properly functioning market, common market, then connectivity is important. And of course, it includes maritime and digital, as Donna said. But we're also locating it within the broader logistical framework. So it's not a matter of simply moving persons from point A to point B. We have to consider the entire ecosystem. So any prospects for improving realizing the potential of this sector must take interventions in all those nodes in that ecosystem into consideration. And to us, that is part of what development is all about. That is where we are interested, simply because that is how we will be able, as a development bank, to close the distance to our sustainable development goals, which essentially is our North Star. And so we think that in order, given the intersectionality of air transport with other things, that there has to be a different kind of collaboration that takes place in the sector. We need to learn from the mistakes of the past, but we also need to take our extant circumstances into consideration. The Caribbean, again, because we are dispersed by water, short sector, average sector length, it's uniquely different. And so we need to take those aspects into consideration in crafting any solutions for realizing the true potential of the sector.
Thank you. First of all, I'm honored to be here today, and I wanted to give a nice thank you to USAID, Philip, for really organizing this great panel. Business aviation has significant potential to be able to increase interconnectivity within the Caribbean, aid in business development, as well as increase the workforce, all while supporting law enforcement, medical care, disaster relief, gaps in the supply chain, and other essential services. But in order to do that, there needs to be a uniform set of infrastructure. When they're flying in, they need to know what they're flying into with the runways, with the fueling services, with the security facilities. They want to be able to operate safe and secure flights. And when I was talking about business aviation, what I'm meaning is in the US, we have what we call Part 121. That is what the airlines are under. We fall under Part 135 and Part 145. So that's the private aircraft, your charter jets, your fixed-based operators, your mechanics that serve these. So this is, smaller aircraft, essentially those aircraft that have 30 passengers or less. So they are able to really fly into places that maybe some of the larger carriers could not. But in general, there needs to be the infrastructure, there needs to be training, and NADA has a lot of services that we're happy to help provide so that our goal would be so that the Caribbean can help themselves continue to succeed in this area and really increase interconnectivity. But as my colleague said, we really need the collaboration, and collaboration is key to be able to make it a full success.
Okay, now we're going to have the real discussion. Thank you for sharing your initial thoughts. I'm going to ask the panel some questions, and please, if you have a point of view, I would ask you to just hit your button and share it. As ambassador, I have 3 priorities. One is addressing climate change, 2 is ensuring regional security, and 3 is fostering economic prosperity for all. Aviation is involved in all 3 of those. And aviation, as you all know, folks who live here, it's your lifeline. It's not an option. You have to do it to get places. People who want visas from the United States have to fly to Barbados. So we know how critical aviation is to the life and lifeblood of this region. And we are very committed as the U.S. Embassy to partner with Barbados and our other partners that you see on the panel here and our other countries to help. What can we do to make it better? Because it's not working really well. I mean, you heard a nice story, and it was great. We heard the optimistic view of where it's headed, but anyone that flies in this region knows it's not easy, and it's very expensive, and it's often not on time, and it doesn't go the places you want it to go. And so what we want to talk about today is, what can be done to fix that? Each of you has a key component, but I'd be really interested in, we know what doesn't work, so how can we do better? Please.
All right, so I'm sure when I look at this room, I'm sure persons remember the glory days of 100 US would get you through any island in the OACS, Barbados, you had choice, you had maybe 3 or 4 airlines you could choose from. So this definitely told us the price point. And during that period, it must have been maybe 15 years ago when we had that price point. And during that period, we also saw the highest levels of intra-regional travel. What you would hear now is people saying, well, if I have to fly from St. Lucia to Barbados for 500 US, I may as well put 100 US and go to Miami and shop and have a great grand old time. So it tells us something about the value people put on the leisure aspect, because as you said, Ambassador, if we have to get our visas in Barbados and it costs us 1,000 US, we're coming to Barbados. So the leisure market is where we are struggling. If persons have a choice, what choice would they make? And when we break down the cost of an airline ticket, we see taxes added on to that. And it's a catch-22 for us in that the taxes are to fund the airports, to meet sometimes international requirements, customer demands or airline requirements. If you have to increase the size of your runway, how do you fund it? And for some countries, these taxes are very important. At the same time, the taxes is prohibitive at some times. So agencies like us at the Caribbean Tourism Organization, a significant part of our role is to find that balance. And while we do not dictate to governments what position they take on taxes, that's for individual countries to do, we could certainly do the work in terms of providing research, models, best practices. And one such best practice is the PPPs, public-private partnerships. And we see some examples in the region where that has worked well. What that does is that it allows for a wonderful customer experience because you have a partner who's going to come with a certain level of expertise, who could make commercial decisions while the state keeps control of regulations. At the same time, keeping the cost as it relates to the tax portion of it, keeping that at a certain level so the overall pricing of tickets would remain a little bit more more comfortable for our guests. So this is one of the key points for us in terms of the tax aspect of it and the cost of travel. And there are other aspects that we could talk about this afternoon, but I think one of the biggest prohibitive factors for us is the cost of travel, followed by the infrastructure and the experience that our visitors and also our residents experience when traveling both into the Caribbean and outside of the Caribbean. So that will be me addressing one of the biggest elephants in the room, which is taxation.
Well, and I'd like to follow up on that because I think that's a very, it's not a sexy topic, but it impacts everybody and every ticket. Isaac, you're on the banking side, and we've talked a little bit yesterday about what are some efforts to kind of address the disparities in, if each country in, this region is out-taxing the other, at some point you can't afford a ticket to go visit a friend or get a visa or visit family. Like, what can be done to address the taxation is impacting everybody. I mean, we see it. I mean, it's cheaper for us, honestly, to fly to Miami than it is to some of the other islands in the region. So what can be done, what's being done about the taxation issue?
Thank you, Ambassador. So I think at this point I could put away my notes. Having been in this sector for a while, as a part of my night duties. Now, so Donna, I think, spoke about the cost. And I think I referenced that earlier in terms of the mere fact that how we are located in the region, the cost of travel is going to be high, relatively speaking. And we need to understand as well that in the aviation sector, globally, it is a turbulent space at the best of times. No pun intended. Well, I shouldn't even use turbulent now, not from the recent events of the past few days, right? But it has been. And so the mere fact that you have this very short sector length, it means that the frequent landings and takeoff is going to impose a disproportionate cost on the operation of airlines. That is a given. The other thing that I think we need to take into consideration, remember I said that we'll approach this from an ecosystem standpoint, and there are several nodes. One of those nodes is aging infrastructure. With the aging infrastructure, there's a cost. There's a cost to taxpayers to put proper infrastructure in place. And as Donna rightly said, that is for the business of capitals to determine how they're going to finance that. But I'm only putting it on the table so that we could be sensitive to the choices governments have to make in treating with these issues. What I could tell you though is that there probably is, we're living in two worlds here, because I know there is the way government approach the international carriers and the way they approach the regional carriers is totally different. And I think there's scope there for us to relook how we treat with all the players in this space. I think if we're able to do that, we could come up with less controversial means of addressing the tax issue. So for example, I know a lot of governments do have budget lines where they pay minimum guarantees to the international carriers. I don't think any of the regional carriers benefit from minimum guarantees. And having been in the space and tried to lobby for minimum guarantee for an entity I was associated with, I know that is like pulling teeth. And so I think that is there's scope to do that a little differently. And I think it's less controversial. It is not as obvious to people if you have to raise taxes here and raise taxes there and so on. But the other point, there are some events that occurred globally that impacted the region, again, disproportionately. The events of 9/11, don't forget, imposed significant costs on our regional governments to take care of those security issues. So there are some inescapable bits that we just need to take into consideration. There's just one other point I'll make on this, is that I know that all of the regional carriers are trying hard to be as efficient as possible. They're trying to ensure that they continue to run a viable business. But they're caught in a vice. They're caught in a vice of trying to be efficient, but at the same time, building resilience into their operations. And COVID-19 taught us that in the aviation sector, in our space, there was absolutely no resilience. And that is why we're suffering now. And so how do you, on the one hand, balance your efficiency considerations with that public good? That is why the partnership and the collaboration is key if we really have to make any meaningful change in how air transport takes place in the region.
Isaac, who should lead that charge, if on that, especially on the tax piece? Because who owns that, and who should be working on that?
Well, remember I said up front we need to collaborate differently. So I think Donna spoke to PPP, and that is a technical construct. But I think the type of collaboration I'm talking about, folks in the bank, I refer to it as radical collaboration, where we collaborate in a way that we weren't collaborating before. So I think governments, first of all, need to look at the private sector differently. If the private sector contributes in excess of 85% of gross national income, Ian, across the region. That's the director of economics. So if I'm looking for the right figure here. If it means that the private sector is very critical to our livelihood going forward, our development. And so you need to see the private sector as more than an equal partner in how we move forward. So we could talk about PPP, but we need to twist it around. It is not something that should necessarily be led by the government.
So it doesn't exist today, is what you're saying?
Well, I think the way we look at the private sector needs to be reframed.
Okay.
That's the point I'm making, really.
Great, thank you. So it's an opportunity. for everyone in this audience to help solve it. I would like to, Lyndon, I would like to ask you, because I'm on your planes at least several times a month, and I think you have a really, robust network, probably, one of the most robust in the region. And we were talking, and you actually answered in a way that I was surprised that, because I was asking about, is there room for competition? Is there room for other quality airlines? And you were like, absolutely. We want that. It's better for the industry. It's better for the region to have more, more regional airlines. Could you talk a bit about that? Like, what do you see? What is it going to take? I mean, you have probably the most on the ground experience here. What is it going to take to get a more robust inter-island network? Not served by necessarily just one airline, but what is it going to take? And what are the obstacles, and how do we get there?
Well, thank you, Ambassador. I think it's going to take a lot. Some of what Mr. Solomon spoke about in terms of the collaboration. What I can say is that airlines, we always look at future and how do we stay relevant with what our passenger needs are, stay relevant with what the route needs are. Certainly, the taxes is certainly an issue for us, and that's a whole subject that I think she's spent some time on, but I came prepared to spend at least an hour on it. But
that's the next session.
But we won't do that today. What I wanted to say before going into answering your question is that we spend a lot of time looking at how we maintain efficiency. Maintaining efficiency with our processes, maintaining efficiency. We even go and buy newer airplanes so that we are able to offer more efficient service. And so as it relates to the cost of the flights, when you consider the inflation, airline tickets haven't increased in 20 years. What's increased is the other costs associated with travel, taxes being one of them that comes out every time. Certainly, we believe in a free market system. The free market system is where entities will compete, obviously on a level playing field. And I believe that the customer are the ones that eventually benefits from having this competition. Because once you have, let's say we all buy essentially the same airplanes after a certain number of years, you need to modernize the fleet, and some airlines may do it a bit before the others. But creating, having innovation in our business.
But what do we need to do in this region to do, not just your airline, but what do we need to do to have a robust inter-island network? We don't have that.
Well,
and I mean, we have to fly to Miami sometimes to get back down to one of the islands because there are no direct flights.
Well, some of it includes some of the regulatory hurdles that airlines have to go for landing permits at various islands in terms of where you go and whether or not you can go on a direct journey from point A to point B, or you have to stop at one place. Some of it also has to do about the airports, because obviously if you have the ability to operate a longer day, you can certainly operate more destinations. And I like the one that Mr. Solomon spoke about. I mean, some of the routes, they're simply not profitable, and I think governments need to take a more proactive approach in supporting the airlines, and not necessarily giving handouts, but you have that support that's based on performance, because not all the routes will perform. But if you're taking people, I think they need to have a view that the airport is a public service. It's like the roads, like the schools, like the hospitals, where you have to have it, because a lot of us in this room came by airplane, and a lot of us, because we don't live here, we're going to put money in the economy with a hotel, with a car rental, with food, with everything else. And those are things that you cannot quantify easily anyway. And so I think those are the things that will assist us or assist airlines in having more routes and being able to operate a more robust connected service.
So you think this market can absorb one or two additional regional airlines?
I think as I said, for me, I know you want a straight answer.
That's why I keep asking it.
But I verily believe that with most business, competition should drive pricing and should drive who the players are in the marketplace.
Thank you. Isaac?
So I just wanted to comment on a couple of things, points Nathan made. In terms of he did say that the cost of airline tickets remain stable for a long time, and I guess that was a plug to indicate that the non-airline issues were the causes of the rise in ticket prices. But I am not so sure that is absolutely correct, because we know that jet fuel went out of the roof a few years ago, and that is one of the biggest variable costs that the airlines carry in pricing their tickets. That said, though, I think the multilateral air services agreement, I think, is a critical piece, a critical tool that can be used to address many of the issues that we're talking about here.
Can you please explain what that is?
So this is the agreement that the CARICOM member states signed on to essentially rationalize air transportation in the space, treating with issues of regulation, competition, route analysis, and everything like that. The thing is, we keep thinking this is an imperfect market. And if we think that competition alone is going to fix the problem, we will be in for a rude awakening. Because unless you have the regulatory infrastructure in place, we are going to cause more disruption than we can afford. We saw that before, where we lived in a space where every Monday morning you had some issues around predatory pricing. And to the extent that we think that competition could bring prices down, we are assuming that there are inefficiencies in the operations, or there are some abnormal profits that are being made. And perhaps, if I'm wrong, Lyndon can correct me whether he's making abnormal profits or not, or whether he is inefficient. So, with those two assumptions out of the window, it means we have to look elsewhere in terms of how we fix the connectivity around this space. Right now, I believe that there isn't any room for any more carriers coming into the space without causing dislocation. I think we have a lot of capacity, but the issue is how that capacity is distributed. So you get to some places easier than others. And if a new airline comes in, they are going to go on the routes that are profitable, and the underserved routes will remain underserved. There's one other issue, and I have the right people at the table. In terms of the fifth freedom rights that countries have granted to the international carriers, the international carriers are getting a contribution to their fixed costs by being able to take passengers intra-regionally, to put it simply. So that's a direct contribution to their fixed costs. It is a contribution they would not have had without that fifth freedom right. That, in a sense, put pressure on the regional airlines. And I benefit from it, because when I'm traveling to St. Vincent, it's cheaper getting on Virgin, and the one thing you know is that you will never hear that it is full. You're always guaranteed a seat. But what does that do to the sector? I mean, we need to face these things head on. Until you have regulated the space properly, I think the additional thing that we're thinking about, the piecemeal approach, is not helping us.
I'm going to go to Hannah and then Jenny. Yeah, real quick.
I mean, my responses was really considering regional.
Yeah, press your mic again. Turn yours off.
Oh,
There we go.
There you go. See, he wants to still take it all. So my responses were really geared to the regional. I think the question was framed for regional airlines, and my response was in that context.
Hannah, I saw you shaking your head about not having enough capacity in the market, but I also, in chatting with you, learned that Virgin Atlantic has even added some inter-island flights, which I did not know about. So can you share that?
Yeah, so we actually added inter-island flights between Barbados and Grenada and Barbados and St. Vincent in June of last year. So I guess you could call us the new inter-island carriers. And competition sat right next to me. Awkward. So I mean, we were flying those destinations anyway. So our flights would leave London, stop in Barbados, and then go on to St. Vincent or Grenada. So we recognized that there was a massive opportunity. We had seen all the news, and I've lived in Barbados for 10 years, so I'm well versed in how difficult it is to get around. And we went through about an 18-month process of getting those flights up and running. And that was considering everything from, as Mr. Solomon said, the Fifth Freedom rights, getting the governments on board, and really making sure that our customer experience was where it needed to be, making sure that operationally, safety, security, etc., that we ticked all the boxes. And I'm pleased to say that those flights have been super beneficial to us, and we're seeing a lot of passengers use us. I think my key point would be that if it wasn't for the collaboration of the governments, the British High Commission, I have to give props to them because they certainly helped facilitate it. Even through our partners, Caribbean Airlines, who are not here today, Inter-Caribbean, we all had to work together to make it happen. And I think we welcome the competition, you welcome the competition. We are trying our best to do what we can for the region.
So I'm really excited to hear from Jenny Ann, because she represents thousands of companies, a number of which, many are airlines, and some of which have expressed interest in this region. So can you share, based on what you've heard, what are the opportunities that you see?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ambassador. So, we've been talking about all the different airlines, but this is why business aviation is such a wonderful solution, because we're not competing with the airlines as much. We are the air carriers, the business. And a lot of my members are very small businesses. But as I mentioned, I had members immediately saying, hey, we would love to come down there, and we have an interest in it. As well as if there's local carriers that are interested, they were offering to come do information sharing. So really helping, collaborate and allow the Caribbean businesses to help thrive. But in that aspect, as I've mentioned, they're really interested, and this is key in the U.S., or at least for some of my U.S. companies, is safety, security, environmental friendly, which I know is really important to the ambassador as well. But how do we do that in a proper manner and allow for it to thrive within the Caribbean? There's two big aspects of it that I see. One is looking at what type of approach you have. My suggestion is on the hub and spoke approach. And excuse me, I'm from the South, so I do tend to refer to idiosms. But what I mean by that is having one location, as a hub, and then going out from there. Interconnectivity in that way, but in that aspect, that doesn't mean that the hub has to be the one getting all the revenue. Instead, there could be different types of revenue sharing within taxes. That's another reason why collaboration is key. But having it go back and forth, we don't want these flights having to just go back to the U.S. and then come out here. We want that money staying in the Caribbean. And when saying we, I'm thinking about it from y'all's perspective, really ensuring that there is money, there is interconnectivity, so that the ambassador also doesn't have to fly to Miami to go back down here. I'm sure his staff would also appreciate the less flight time.
Oh, no, they want me in Miami.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. But then the other point that I think is really key, and where, we see small businesses, have a little bit of challenges, is that there needs to be a harmonized regulatory scheme. Small businesses having to comply with all these different regulations and to do this interconnectivity, it's difficult. Also complying with the protocols, having to have different timelines for each Caribbean member state that they're going into can be challenging if you want to get this, up and running. And so I don't necessarily know that there's a exact answer that I'm going to give you today on the harmonized regulatory scheme, but I think that there's different models you can look at. So one model, the U.S. is really strict. That doesn't mean you have to be as stringent on this. As well as I mentioned before, there's different regulations for business aviation than there is for the airlines. And there's reasons for that. There's safety reasons, there's security reasons. Some of the security things you were mentioning, a lot of the charter flights do not have to go through security, but there's reasons behind that. Also looking at it, don't worry, there was security analysis done on that. But then also, I would say, look at the EU, where, Hannah was, I guess Brexit, but, look at the EU, where it's a lot easier for companies to enter into market versus how it is in the US. And then finally, I recently moved back to the United States after working in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And there they had a really unique perspective where they were creating regulations. This was more around new mobility, but it was a regulatory sandbox. So it was a testing environment where they partnered, so public-private partnership, got the companies to come in, and there was regulations, some barriers set up around that testing method, but instead the companies helped work with the government to see what regulations worked best for the Kingdom of Saudi. So not just because it works one way in the UK or this, but they were able to have a voice in that. And I think that's very encouraging as well to have have your people that are operating these flights come in and be able to say, hey, this regulation is or isn't working. Hey, we need safer, we need a regulation around safety. We need a regulation around environmental, or we don't need these types of regulations, but really having a say in it, collaboration within the inner islands, but also collaboration with the private businesses.
And the U.S. Embassy is very eager to support your member interest in this region, so look forward to that. I have a question for Donna, because I've come to learn from the Barbados government that Americans will become the #1 tourist in Barbados this year for the first time ever, overtaking British tourists. Americans often, when we travel to faraway destinations, and this is far away for many Americans, we would like to see multiple countries, because they're so close. So regional airlines are key in that equation, because right now, my understanding is Americans, and that's what I know, will come, they will get on a cruise ship, they won't all necessarily spend money in the country, other than getting on and off the boat. Like, how do we make that, it seems like an improved regional aviation sector will be like a huge economic injection into these countries, because they'll be able to travel to multiple countries and visit, even if they're on a cruise. They can do a cruise, but then they can pop over and spend 2 more days in another country. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this is one of the opportunities in terms of multi-destination travel. And the good news is that literally, as I speak, there is a press trip that is happening. So with our partners, the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, they have facilitated at least, I believe, 25 or so travel trade press that are going from St. Lucia to, I believe, Barbados, Turks, I believe, Cayman Islands as well, to kind of show them what multi-destination travel is all about. Next week, we have another fam trip that's following a similar route, and I believe that we're working with Virgin Atlantic on that. This is a great initiative, and I think it can work. But one of the biggest challenges, and Mr. Solomon alluded to that, is that where I sit at CTO is that I have 25 members. Unlike the Pacific Isles or the Kingdom of Saudi, that's 25 different governments, sovereign governments with their own systems, their own policies, and we have to be mindful of respect and respect for that. But it doesn't mean that it cannot work. We make it work during World Cup cricket, right? We make a lot of things happen. So it has to take that willpower to make it happen. So multi-destination travel is definitely one of the areas of opportunity for growth for us, but it will only happen if we fix those kinks. The fact that every island I go to, I have to stop at customs and immigration and go through the same process. Every island I have to go to, I have to check in because my boarding pass doesn't take me from St. Lucia to Grenada without checking in again. So that partnership between the governments, the airlines, the regulatory bodies, all of that has to come together. And then in the Caribbean, it's complicated because, again, as I said, we're dealing with separate jurisdictions. We're dealing with French, Dutch, Spanish. So while we are beautiful and we have so much diversity, there's so much that we have to come together, but I don't see it as a hindrance. I see it as an opportunity.
Great, thank you. We're going to take some questions from the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand. We have a mic coming to you, sir. The mic is right here in the middle. Right there. Raise your hand. There we go. Thank you. And if you could please, short question and direct it to one of our speakers.
Yes, Roberto Samayoa, Pan American Health Organization. We purchase medicines and vaccines for the entire Americas, and we have one price for everybody. So a vaccine will have one price. If I send it to Brazil, it comes like 17 cents, I think it's per kilogram or per pound, I don't remember. If I come to the Caribbean, it's 57 cents. So a small island will get a bill of 200,000, 150,000 in goods, 44,000 in freight. That limits access to health in the country. So if I understood, this is just a tax issue. If there's an exception for essential goods and services, would that do the trick of lowering freights?
I think you're spot on. It's an issue that would be wrapped into this discussion because it's freight and passengers. It's, I don't know the specific case about the medication, but it's very
Usually
relevant.
they come in the belly of the same area, what is it?
As
passenger-
aircraft,
passenger
of course. Yep, it's probably the same issues you wanted. Please.
Also, that's an area, we have quite a few medical air carriers that are members of ours, and also those that do cargo aircraft that are able to get, the vaccines or the medicines in a lot quicker, but they are still having to pay a high tax, and that is a higher issue. So I definitely think looking at, if it's coming for essential goods, looking at how we could get that in, or if there's a tax break on that, but also looking at it not just, I know that a lot of the goods go on the airlines, but also for the business aviation carriers who might be able to get it to area or different member states that aren't able to get it by air currently.
Ma'am.
Thank you, Ambassador. My name is Althea Wiggins. I'm Special Envoy to Prime Minister Motley. My question is Mr. Gardner. Can we look at the areas of route rationalization? Because let's say if you look locally in Barbados and you look at the transport system on the ground, you have a lot of PSVs going to a particular area, one or two going to St. Lucie, one or two going to St. Peter. So if we transpose that to the skies, and we are saying that we have inter-Caribbean and we have Caribbean Airlines and other aircraft, factoring in Virgin, who is doing some of the Caribbean routes, people think that the government has to make a lot of these big decisions. Can the airlines themselves, it's a question I've already spoken to for the day, come together and say, well, these are the amount of countries that we have to service in the region. Why can't we come together and decide, even if you do it on a relay system, where if somebody lands in Barbados, then they can take off by another aircraft and go to Trinidad or go to Georgetown or Paramaribo. Why is it then that you don't, so that the passengers would not be, suffering, as it were, why don't you just come together, look at the routes? You have the statistics in terms of the travel, because CDB certainly has the routes, Ian has the information, in terms of how the passengers move around the Caribbean, and decide within yourselves so that you would not be losing money. Because let's face it, the regional airlines are not making money. That's why LIAT went belly up. I'm saying I think you have to look at it that way and determine that we want to move all of our passengers, because during COVID, it was sad when we had to go to Miami to come back to Suriname, when we had the heads of government conference. That's not right, but luckily for us now, and I'll say it again, we have Suriname Airways that flying now from Barbados to Suriname with a short stop in Georgetown, 45 minutes, and you can get to Suriname. You no longer have to take 4 or 5 hours to Miami. God help you if you don't have a visa, then to come back down to the Caribbean. So I think it is something that you can look at, because one of the other things I would say to you, we had a meeting with one of your managers, because we're looking at bringing people from Brazil as well to the Caribbean, and we're looking at a relay system. You might not always be flying direct, but you can buy one ticket, fly from here to Georgetown, and then take something from Georgetown to Brazil. So I think that that's the way that you're going to have to look at it to help passengers in the Caribbean, and maybe then Virgin and those will not get all the advantage in the Caribbean.
If I could quickly step in, so at Virgin Atlantic, we have an interline agreement with Caribbean Airlines, and we also have code-share agreements with other people. So we do collaborate, we do work together, we do things like, for example, we might say, you take someone down to St. Vincent in the morning, we'll bring them back in the evening. We are very collaborative. And even with Inter-Caribbean, we look at our schedules, we look at their schedules to make sure that when we land, we can easily get a passenger onto somebody else's aircraft. With the interline agreements and the code share agreements, that means that it's on one ticket. That means that we will take your bag the whole way through. So I think it's unfair to say that we don't collaborate. We definitely do. We spend a lot of time with our partners to make sure that schedules align, pricing aligns, that we have minimum connection times that work for our airport colleagues. So we work together quite a lot already.
No, I meant the regional airlines.
Well, two things. I think whilst what you say sounds a bit innocent, to start with, one of the two big questions for airlines has to do with antitrust, and whether or not we collusion and antitrust, and there must not be that, and there must not be the appearance of that. And so if we got in the room and say, okay, well, there's only so many people to Trinidad, well, you do all the flights to Trinidad, and there's so many to St. Vincent, and we do the flights to St. Vincent, then you, by default, end up with a kind of a monopoly. Not only you end up with a monopoly, but there's a cardinal rule that airlines are not supposed to collude and or have any of this kind of antitrust situation. I think we're all very paranoid about that, and it is the right thing to do. We would like, obviously, to see. There are other ways in which we can cooperate. Ms. Swift mentioned some of them. Code shares, interline agreements, and other commercial agreements, which will, in effect, provide the customer with an opportunity to move. It may be that you want to go to Grenada, and you have an inter-Caribbean ticket, and we don't go the day that you want. So we are able to, have some kind of a commercial relationship with Virgin to be able to use it. I think those are the kinds of areas in which we were able to collaborate.
I'm going to wrap us up. If you have questions for the panel, please grab them after the panel, but I'm going to go down the line. I'm going to ask each of you for a no more than 30-second final thought. So think. I'll start. What I heard today, and I really want to thank this panel, it's a really fantastic group of experts and committed professionals and folks who are committed to this region. I heard that we need to collaborate in a new way. I also heard pretty clearly that no one is doing this work, or at least not doing it, in a very concerted way. So there's opportunity for us to kickstart that. But I also heard there's an opportunity for more. There's more service, more connections, more opportunity, which I think is very exciting.
Thank you, and I did want to thank the ambassador for taking the time to be here and really allowing aviation to be, such a critical topic. One thing that, I did want to offer to any of the audience, I'm happy to speak with anyone afterwards or later on. Please feel free to contact me. But one thing I would like to mention is the best way I've found to look at how you could get businesses into here is think about what is in it for them. I always like to say, well, I'm looking at things like what's in it for me, but what's in it for them? And that doesn't necessarily always have to be tax breaks. There is many different creative ideas, such as long-term guarantees, revenue sharing agreements, but also look at, different ways of creative partnership and think, what would you want if you were a small business coming into the regions? That's what I would encourage. Thank you.
Thank you. Like I started, the Caribbean Development Bank sees air transport as a critical lever for development in the region. We have been involved in this space since inception. The bank is 53 years old. Our first regional loan, one of our first regional loans, was a loan of $5.8 million to Liat 1974 Limited in 1975. So we have been in this business for a long time. We see the increased importance of connectivity and the role that air transport plays in that space. And we are keen to continue to support our borrowing member countries, the citizens of this region, to ensure that they have the connectivity they deserve. I think there are some useful lessons that we have learned from events that took place in the recent past. We recognize that governments who are constrained fiscally are not in the best place to execute air transport business. We are encouraged by the number of private sector actors we have seen in the space, but there clearly are some issues remaining in rationalizing routes and ensuring that the underserved routes get service. And I think that is the role that the government can play to ensure that we have good route rationalization and connectivity right across the market. And of course, we continue to stand ready to support anyone in any way we can once it is within our mandate.
30 seconds, here we go. Collaboration is key. It would be remiss of me if I didn't say that our return flights are about $300 US, not the $500 US that was mentioned. And I will speak for both myself and Lyndon when I say that as an airline, our single biggest cost is fuel. So we're trying to innovate and trying to look at different fuel sources, as you'll have seen with our 100% sustainable aviation fuel flight. And what I would say from me is, if you are traveling interregionally, talk about it. As the ambassador said at the beginning, he didn't know that we did inter-island flights. Let's talk about it. Let's actually talk about the positive things about interregional connectivity instead of always sitting on the negative. I love to fly into Caribbean. I have a great time when I go to Antigua. I always fly with you guys. I think the staff are amazing. I think let's encourage more people to travel interregionally and leave the negatives behind.
Well, for me, I thought I'd get a lot more to say, Ambassador, but I didn't. I think, quite frankly, the governments have spent a lot of money, and they keep talking about improving the infrastructure, but there are little things that that we're not doing to improve the passenger experience, and those are some of the things that does not necessarily need a lot of money, but it needs to employ technology and innovation. Certainly. In other parts of the Caribbean, it's, things are moving forward. In the Dutch Caribbean, for instance, you have the e-gates and that kind of thing. I certainly believe that we can do more. The airlines certainly are doing what we can. The reason Heather's price is 300 and not 500 is she's got a 280-seat airplane instead of a 50-seat airplane, so there's a cost difference there. And it's a tag-on flight, and ours is not a tag-on flight. Thank you very much for flying with us, though.
Well, from my perspective, don't underestimate the power of Taylor Swift. The reason I say that is because if we could create demand for our destination, for travel and tourism into the Caribbean, the way this young lady could create demand for her music, we will be in a very good place, and Hannah and Lyndon would have to put additional flights into the Caribbean. This is a demand-driven business, and we have to use everything and every opportunity around us. I mentioned earlier digital connectivity. Taylor Swift, she does that well. Collaboration, she does it well. She collaborates with the Super Bowl. Imagine that. So similarly, just us being here in this room tells us our commitment. If our ambassador from the United States to Barbados and the OACS could take time off his schedule to focus on this, this is an opportunity right here for partnership with our greatest source market, which is the United States. If we look at the level of penetration we have in the United States alone, the opportunities are limitless. And I will end by saying this: tourism is not only the job of persons within that space, but it's a collaborative effort. The gentleman left the room who asked about the healthcare. So for us to, as we move forward in terms of reform of tourism, redefining and reimagining what tourism is all about, we have to take into the other sectors that could support travel and tourism in the region, and that is where CTO is best placed to do that. Ambassador, you mentioned who's going to take up the mantle in terms of that collaboration. On behalf of CTO, I put my hands up.
Bravo, thank you. That's amazing. And I will share with you, we would be happy to partner with you as the U.S. Embassy. One of just my parting comment is, as an embassy, this is a high priority for us. It's a high priority for me personally, and as a result, it's a high priority for the embassy, which I kind of love. But we recently formed, we have not yet announced it, so you get to hear this first. We have formed an aviation working group that is a number, actually anyone, members, raise your hand. Several, 1, 2, 3, 4 of our, 3 of our members here. I'm a member of 4. And we are actually looking at all these issues. We're going to take what we learned today and continue to build the relationships with the folks that you see here and elsewhere to advance these issues in the region, because we believe this is something we actually can do. We have the right connections, we have the right tools to help nudge, encourage. I'm happy to advocate with prime ministers. I've talked with Prime Minister Motley about this. Every prime minister brings this up as a high priority, every single one of them. And so I'm so grateful that all of you were here today, and please join me in a big round of applause for our speakers.